Nicole West, Roger's new wife, plotted to take away all the assets my father left me, but she never expected everything was according to my father's plan. My name is Pamela Harris, I'm 31 years old, and by law, I am the sole heir to my father Harold Harris's estate. It's strange how quickly fortunes can turn, how swiftly the people you thought you knew can reveal their true intentions. Yet perhaps it wasn't all that sudden. Maybe the signs were there all along, lurking behind polite smiles and forced kindness, waiting for the moment they could pounce. The morning air still carried the scent of last night's rain, a cool, damp fragrance that clung to the garden. My father had always said gardens hold secrets. If you listen carefully, the rustle of leaves and the sway of branches can tell you stories of the past. As I knelt by the white roses he planted decades ago, I brushed my fingers over their velvety petals, thinking about how he used to kneel right here, offering me a freshly clipped rose whenever I felt upset. He taught me to prune away the old, dead parts so new growth could flourish. It was his unspoken metaphor for life. I was so absorbed in my thoughts that I didn't notice the footsteps behind me until they were almost upon me, the click of expensive heels on gravel jarring me from my memories. My father often told me in hushed voices that not all visitors come to bring light. Some come only to cast shadows. And I knew, without turning, that the footsteps belonged to one such shadow. Nicole West, the woman who'd married my ex-husband Roger just months after my father passed. The woman who'd grown bold enough to think she could steal what my father spent a lifetime building. She cleared her throat, a delicate, condescending sound, and I inhaled slowly, preparing myself for the onslaught. "Still playing in the dirt, Pamela?" she asked, her voice sugary but undercut with a mocking sneer. I stayed crouched a moment longer, taking one last steadying breath. "Still stomping where you don't belong, Nicole?" I finally stood, brushing soil off my hands onto my jeans, deliberately showing her that I didn't care about her judgment, or her $1,000 outfit, or her disapproving stare. She looked me over with an expression that said she saw nothing more than an inconvenience. "You know why I'm here," she said, holding a leather-bound portfolio close to her chest like a shield, or perhaps a weapon. I offered a curt nod. Tomorrow was the reading of my father's will, a day I dreaded because it felt like the final chapter in his life. Nicole, on the other hand, was practically salivating at the chance to carve up his estate. "Yes," I said, my voice clipped. "The will is being read tomorrow." Her lips curved, all shine and no warmth. "Roger and I believe it's best if we discuss things beforehand civilly," she continued, emphasizing the last word. That made me laugh under my breath. This woman, who'd done nothing but bring chaos, dared speak about civility. I met her gaze, ignoring the pangs of old wounds. "Civilly," I echoed. "Is that the word you used to justify stabbing people in the back? Because last I checked, you and Roger weren't exactly exemplars of manners or loyalty." She raised a perfectly plucked eyebrow, her face adopting a patronizing concern. "You really should move on," she said. "It's been years since you and Roger divorced after all." I clenched my jaw but refused to be baited. "Is that all you wanted to say? That I should move on, so you can move in and pretend my father's estate belongs to you?" Her portfolio glimmered in the morning light, and she set it against her hip. "Roger was like a son to Harold for 15 years, she declared with a feigned air of sympathy. "And I was his beloved daughter-in-law." "Ex-daughter-in-law," I cut in. Nicole paused, an irritated flicker passing through her eyes before she plastered that fake smile back on. "Either way, we have every right to what Harold left behind." Her arrogance was remarkable, but it wasn't a surprise. She'd been circled by rumors from the day she attached herself to Roger, rumors about her cunning nature, her unstoppable ambition, and her taste for other people's possessions. She probably saw my father as just another prize. Before she could drone on, I stepped closer, letting the sweet smell of roses mix with the bitterness in my voice. "Dad wasn't stupid," I said. "He saw through you and Roger long ago. Do you really think he'd reward your treachery?" Nicole's eyes flashed with annoyance. "We'll see about that," she cooed, her tone dripping with confidence. Then, with a final toss of her platinum hair, She turned on her heel and walked away, the sharp clack of her heels an irritating metronome of impending battle. I stood there, tension radiating through my limbs, waiting for her car engine to fade. A breeze rustled the rosebush, drawing my attention to a flash of white nestled under the low branches. Frowning, I brushed leaves aside, spotting an envelope. It was damp from the dew, corners curled, as though it had been hidden there overnight, or longer. The handwriting on the front made my heart constrict. My father's familiar scrawl. My throat went dry. Dad's final secrets, perhaps. I opened it, my hands trembling, revealing a single folded note and a small brass key. My dearest Pamela, if you're reading this, then someone has come sniffing around the estate. I have a guess who it might be. There's something you need to know, something time didn't let me share. The key in this envelope opens the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside you'll find what you need to protect what's yours. Remember all the chess lessons. Sometimes you sacrifice a pawn to protect the queen. Trust yourself. Love, Dad. His words made my eyes sting with tears. Even from the grave, Harold Harris was guiding me, anticipating Nicole's scheming, ensuring that I wouldn't stand alone when the wolves closed in. I drew a trembling breath, determination flooding my veins. Whatever she and Roger planned, they wouldn't see what was coming. I walked inside to the study that still held traces of my father's cologne and pipe smoke. The worn leather chair he'd favored looked lonely without him in it. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood as I approached the massive oak desk, my grip on that tiny brass key tightening. With a soft click, the drawer unlocked. Pulled it open. Inside lay a thick manila envelope and a small USB drive. My heart raced as I set them on the desk. The envelope felt heavy, like it contained entire worlds. Slowly I peeled it open, gasping at the contents. Documents, photographs, emails, a treasure trove of evidence. My father had compiled a detailed record of Nicole and Roger's underhanded deals. Photos capturing them with suspicious associates, emails referencing manipulated finances, bank statements showing suspicious transfers. He'd not only suspected them, he'd built an airtight case against them. My phone buzzed as I stood there, reeling. It was Betty, my close friend and a skilled attorney. Her voice immediately filled with concern. "Pamela, is everything all right? I need you to come over," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. She didn't hesitate. "I'll be there soon," she said, and the line went dead. The hush of the house pressed in around me, but I felt a growing sense of resolve. Nicole and Roger thought they had an easy target. They had no idea Harold Harris had left them a minefield. Betty arrived within the hour, clad in a sharp navy suit, hair pinned back, her eyes sharp with focus. She noticed the envelope, the documents, the USB, and her lips parted. "Good God," she murmured, flipping through the pictures of Nicole sitting across from a shady accountant, of Roger shaking hands with men who practically screamed, "Con artist." She read a few lines from the emails, her expression hardening. "Your father set a trap," she said. "He must have known exactly how this would play out." I nodded, my stomach twisting. "He was always 2 steps ahead," I whispered. "He said I'd find everything I need to protect what's mine. This must be it." Betty's gaze met mine, and an unspoken understanding passed between us. The reading of the will was less than a day away. We had the evidence, the impetus to ensure that if Nicole and Roger tried to seize control, they would walk straight into Dad's final plan. A shaky laugh escaped me, equal parts relief and grief. "Pamela," Betty said quietly, "we can't let them know we have this until it matters most. If we reveal it too soon, they'll scramble and maybe strike a deal or bury some evidence. Let them think they've won, until the moment we pull the rug out from under them." I swallowed, recalling how Dad would always emphasize that timing was everything, especially in a legal or strategic battle. He'd taught me chess from a young age, insisting that controlling the clock was as vital as controlling the board. "We make our move at the reading," I said resolutely. Betty smiled, her eyes bright with determination. "They'll never see it coming." The day of the will reading dawned bright but tense. I dressed in simple black slacks and a dark blouse. There was no need for flamboyance. My father always told me, let your substance do the talking, not your appearance. Sean arrived early, hands shoved in his pockets, face lined with worry. We hadn't had a proper conversation since the funeral. I'd been angry at him, suspecting he was siding with Roger, but he was here now, silent yet present. When we entered the study, Nicole and Roger were already there, along with her camera crew of all things. My stomach flipped. So she intended to film a triumphant documentary. The nerve of that woman. She offered me a dazzling smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Pamela, so good of you to join us," she cooed, motioning for the cameras to focus on her. "We're just documenting the final chapter of Harold Harris's brilliant legacy." I bit back a sarcastic retort as Sean stepped in front of me, blocking the camera's view. Betty, ever the professional, greeted the estate lawyer who was officiating the reading. He was a gray-haired gentleman named Walter. His expression calm but curious as he glanced at the cameras. Walter cleared his throat, unbuttoned his suit jacket, and gestured for everyone to be seated around a grand mahogany table. Nicole sat with rigid poise, crossing her legs, her posture exuding confidence. Roger, on her left, tried to match that calm facade, though a tremor in his hand betrayed him. Sean and I took seats across from them. Betty stood behind me, resting a comforting hand on my shoulder. Walter began reading the will in a measured voice, the formalities passing in a blur. It felt like I was watching a scene behind glass, distant and surreal. All I could think about was the final line, the distribution of the estate. Nicole was practically giddy, her eyes flicking to the cameras, her expression smug. I caught a glimpse of Sean's tense profile, Betty's neutral stance, and realized we were all waiting for the moment Dad's true plan would reveal itself. Finally, Walter reached the critical section. "To my daughter, Pamela Harris, I bequeath 60% of my estate. To Roger West II, I bequeath 40%. Nicole let out a triumphant laugh, tossing her hair back. "I knew it," she crowed, glancing to the camera. Harold understood how much Roger meant to him, how devoted we were to his vision. My grip on the table's edge tightened, but I forced my face to remain blank. Of course, she'd interpret this as a victory. The cameras captured her every gloating word. She even had the gall to say, "Pamela, darling, maybe you should just move out quietly. It's for the best, yes." My pulse pounded. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her she was insane if she thought I'd just vanish, but I recalled Dad's words about chess. Timing was key. So I stayed silent, letting her believe she'd triumphed. Walter cleared his throat again. "There is, however, an additional clause," he said, flipping to another page. "An amendment filed 3 days before Harold Harris passed." Nicole's smile froze, but she tried to hide her wariness. "And what might that be?" Walter read. "All beneficiaries of Harold Harris's will shall be subject to a legal audit and review of their financial and personal dealings for the past several years. Any evidence of malicious intent, fraud, or other wrongdoing aimed at the estate or its rightful heirs will result in forfeiture of all claims." Hush fell. Nicole blinked, clearly unprepared. Roger's eyes darted around, searching for an escape. The camera operators exchanged glances, unsure if they should keep filming. Nicole's lips parted in disbelieving fury. That's outrageous," she sputtered. "Harold was never so paranoid." Walter tapped his finger on the official seal. "This is signed by Harold Harris himself, witnessed by 2 others, and notarized. It's perfectly valid." I stood, my heart thumping. "Sounds like Dad wanted to ensure no one took advantage of him or his estate," I said evenly. "We'll have to follow his wishes, won't we?" Betty, seizing the moment, opened the thick folder Dad left me. "Indeed," she said softly. "We've already conducted an informal review. It seems we discovered quite a bit." Nicole's face whitened as Betty laid out copies of emails, photographs of suspicious meetings, bank transfers, all neatly labeled. The smell of tension was electric, fear crackling in the air. One by one, Betty introduced each piece of evidence, culminating in the USB drive I'd found in the drawer. I watched Nicole's composure unravel, saw the flicker of panic in her eyes. Then the videos played. Grainy footage of Nicole telling an accountant to keep her updated if Dad changed the will. Another showing Roger bragging that I was weak and couldn't possibly challenge them. And then the final one, showing Nicole passing a check across a table to some shadowy figure, referencing ensuring the old man's estate fell into the right hands. Nicole shot up from her seat. "This is a setup," she shouted, voice ricocheting off the walls. Her glossy veneer cracked into raw rage. "You can't do this to me. We own part of this estate." Sean stood as well, calm but with steel in his posture. "No," he said softly. "You tried to steal it." Roger, pale and trembling, stammered something about not knowing the full extent, and just going along for Nicole's sake, but no one believed his excuses. Then came the sound of footsteps in the hallway, louder than the hush in the room. Police officers, strolling in with warrant papers. One officer approached Nicole, who jerked back, eyes wild. "Nicole West," he said, "we have reason to believe you committed conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted bribery in relation to the Harris estate. Please come with us." She struggled, shrieking that she was innocent, that it was all a misunderstanding, that she'd see us in court. But the moment she was handcuffed, her protests turned vulgar. She promised to destroy us, called me names too vile to repeat. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of her meltdown. When they turned to Roger, he sank in his chair, head in his hands, quietly offering to cooperate for a reduced sentence. Sean, on my right, inhaled a shaky breath as the officers led Nicole's shrieking form out. Everything about her glitzy facade was gone, replaced by raw, desperate rage. It was horrifying but also a strange relief, a confirmation that I was finally free of her manipulations. As she disappeared beyond the doorway, the tension in the room lifted. I felt a sob building in my throat, not of sadness but of something akin to triumph. Dad had outwitted them, and I had helped deliver the final blow. The next days were chaos. The estate was locked down, the media reported Nicole's arrest, headlines reading Harris estate scandal, ex-wife and new wife plot betrayal. Betty guided me through countless interviews with law enforcement, carefully handing over my father's meticulously collected evidence. It turned out Dad had suspected Nicole from the day she arrived in our lives, had quietly documented every questionable move. Police uncovered an even darker side to Nicole's background. She had multiple aliases, a string of convictions in other states, and a knack for marrying or seducing wealthy targets to bleed them dry. Her entire relationship with Roger seemed to be a stepping stone to control the Harris fortune. She miscalculated on one detail. Dad was never a fool, and now she was facing serious jail time. When the dust settled, I found myself once again in Dad's study. The leather chair he'd sat in for decades faced the window overlooking the gardens. I sank into it, closing my eyes, remembering how he'd taught me to breathe in conflict. Deep breath in, deep breath out, never let them see you crack. He'd told me that the best revenge was living well, though I sensed he also believed in justice. And justice was exactly what we served Nicole West, or Margaret Phillips, or whomever she truly was. As for Roger, he'd made a deal to testify, ensuring a lesser sentence. Still jail but not for life. Sean told me Roger confessed he'd realized too late how dangerous Nicole was. I couldn't muster sympathy. They both made their choices, and I owed them nothing. A few weeks later, a letter arrived from the district attorney's office, confirming Nicole's conviction. She was sentenced to a lengthy prison term for fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. The media moved on to the next sensational story, leaving me with a quiet estate and a chance to rebuild. One afternoon, tidying Dad's greenhouse, I found a second envelope, tucked behind a row of potted orchids. Inside, more of Dad's handwriting. He told me how he believed in me more than I believed in myself, how he knew this estate, these gardens, my entire inheritance, would be safe in my hands. He wrote that I was never meant just to guard the old grounds, but to create something new, something bright. He reminded me that love and legacy are not about hoarding wealth, but sharing it, growing it, like the flowers we tended since I was a little girl. So I did just that. Sean, feeling remorse for his role in deceiving me, even though it was part of Dad's plan, offered to help me turn the gardens into a public sanctuary. We started small, renovating a section for community events, building a horticulture center in Dad's name, Harold Harris Bloom House, so people from all walks of life could learn about planting, healing the earth and themselves. Betty, proud as ever, handled the legal aspects pro bono, drafting contracts and ensuring no one could ever lay false claim to Dad's estate again. Each day, volunteers arrived to help with the greenhouse, the orchard, and the newly expanded flower fields. Laughter replaced the echoes of old anger, and sunshine replaced the gloom Nicole had cast over the property. Now, months later, I often find myself waking up early to walk among the rows of roses, lilies, and tulips. In the gentle hush of dawn, I think of Dad, of how he taught me to prune away the rotten branches so healthier blooms could flourish. I think of how Nicole believed she'd dethrone me, but instead ended up dethroning herself, a queen dethroned by her own hubris. I think of how Roger's betrayal once stung so fiercely, but now feels like a distant scar on a stronger body. Whenever I glance at the rosebush where I found Dad's first letter, I'm reminded of how he guided me from beyond the grave, equipping me with knowledge and unwavering faith in my abilities. I've learned that sometimes the people we love can only protect us after they're gone, that their final gifts are wisdom and love disguised as challenges. In that sense, Dad never truly left. On the estate's far side stands a small plaque with Dad's name. Beside it, I placed a short quote from him, one he'd repeated all my life. "Bloom after every storm, for you are a flower no winter can kill." The word seemed fitting because I had survived a vicious storm indeed, one conjured by Nicole's greed, by Roger's complicity, by life's cruel twists, and I came out not just intact but flourishing. I still have Dad's last letter, taped into a journal I keep by my bedside. Sometimes, late at night, I read it and let his encouragement seep into me. He wrote of how proud he was that I kept my dignity, refused to cower, refused to be the victim. He said that for every predator in the world, there is someone strong enough to stand up and say, "No more." He was certain I was that someone. I suppose in the end I lived up to that faith. At last, my father's estate is truly mine, free from vultures. My heart is lighter. The orchard grows, the greenhouse bustles, the gardens expand. I've made it my mission to open the gates regularly for local families, hosting flower festivals and children's workshops. My father believed in community more than profiteering. In that sense, the spirit of Harold Harris continues to shape this land, weaving compassion and growth into every nook and corner. Sometimes people ask me about Nicole, about the day the police came, about how I felt seeing her in handcuffs. I tell them I felt vindicated, but also a little sad for her. She spent her life scheming, manipulating, never trusting or loving genuinely. In a way, she was always poor, no matter how many fortunes she stole. That said, I'm glad justice was done. If she sees my face in her nightmares, well, that's on her. As for Roger, I hear he's adjusting poorly to prison life. He never was one for humility. He tries to keep his head down, serving his shortened sentence, perhaps hoping once he's out, he can start fresh. I wish him no particular harm, but I certainly don't wish him well. He made his bed just as Nicole did. At least Sean, who played double agent on Dad's request, has found a measure of peace. He told me he was terrified every single day Nicole might sense his ruse, that he might fail Dad's plan. But Dad was wise in choosing him, and Sean's relief is almost palpable now. And me. I've learned that, though life can be harsh, there's a stubborn kind of hope in each sunrise, each bud that bursts open in spring. I've learned that a single letter from a loved one, discovered at the perfect moment, can shift your destiny. I've learned that letting go of old resentments is as vital as removing dead leaves from a plant, so new leaves can take their place. And I've learned that my father's faith in me was well placed. Like any good gardener, I had to uproot the weeds before they choked out the flowers. It's a happy ending if you think about it. Nicole sits in prison, paying for her deceit. Roger shares that fate, albeit for a shorter time. Sean and I restored the estate into something beneficial, a living tribute to Harold Harris. Betty stands by my side, both legal advisor and friend, celebrating that we turned the darkest chapter into a dawn. And though my father is gone, his presence remains in every plant that thrives under my care, in every memory that shapes me into the woman he believed I could become. Perhaps the best revenge, in the end, isn't just seeing your enemies brought low. It's reclaiming your own story, refusing to let them define you by their betrayals. It's standing tall, planting seeds of hope and growth in the soil they thought was scorched. That's what my father taught me, and that's what I'll carry forward for the rest of my life. So if anyone ever wonders how I survived such a twisted inheritance battle, or how I stood up to cunning schemers who underestimated my resolve, I'd say, I listened to my father's lessons, I trusted myself, and I never forgot the power of planting something new, even after the hardest storm. Because as Dad once said with a proud smile, some flowers only bloom after the rain. And I, Pamela Harris, have finally bloomed.